Steve's muted. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I'm here with my caffeine. The first thing I want to say is me and Puck got presents.
Good morning.
Puck and I.
Smitty just said he acts like he's never seen that intro before. Am I missing something? Do we have a new intro? Smitty, what's wrong with you?
My dad used to look like Riker when he was younger. Yes.
Like Riker from Star Trek, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I used to look like Data. Still do.
Brent Spiner. So somebody was kind enough to send Puck a new Chewy, which he has been all over. He is right here, by the way. You can't see him, but you want this? Yum, nom, there you go. Okay. And they also sent me a hoodie, and I'm Eeyore, and I'm so sad.
It's actual onesie, and it has a tail, too.
It's an actual onesie! So special thanks to the individual who sent that out. I will not name your name, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This thing's adorable, and it's perfect for my basement.
Bull, are you hungry?
Yes.
I can tell. I got the...
Munch.
Dead quiet. It just dead quiet. Anyways, I have my coffee in my smug that Cheshire designed, which we'll be bringing back here soon eventually, I think. But it's still a good cup. I mean, I actually use this even when I'm not even on air. I do use it for my coffee if I don't use my green cup.
Oh, people are asking if it's got the tail. Bet's in the chat. Bet's in the chat.
They just want to see you turn around. By the way, she doesn't have to turn around to show you the tail, by the way, just FYI. There you go. Look at that. Has a tail.
Yay!
Yay! So what do we got today, Chess?
I have my Halloween costume now.
Because I put something, because we were trying to figure out what we're going to do for today, and these two things seem unrelated, but they're really not. And I thought they kind of one flowed into the other, kind of in some ways.
Oh, the proper service and the burden of proof. Yeah, a little bit. They do kind of. It's kind of weird that they sort of. They do kind of go a little bit tertiary, like they're tertiarily related in that. What is the burden on whom in which situation? Because things don't work the same way in every situation.
Yeah, there's some overlap there, and I don't know if Chester wants to get into the details of recent things that have transpired on Twitter, but let's just say there has been some misunderstandings of the burden of proof by some very prominent atheist activists. Go figure.
I have every intention of actually doing coverage of that. I have pretty much everything already ready to go. I just don't want to stream twice in one day, so I'll probably do it either tomorrow or the day after because I'm also going to the grocery store. Well, and I'm inept. I can only do one thing a day.
If you don't already have the link for that scheduled for tomorrow, as soon as you get it to me so I can put it in this video so people can go right to that afterwards, because that would work. Yeah, so she'll give you all the details on that kerfluffle on her channel. She likes that kind of stuff. I don't get it. Hey, I don't judge, but by the way, I watch it.
Look at how much I like this. I am sad Eeyore.
I'm fine with watching it on yours. I really am. Be my guest. The kerfluffles are just plentiful, just to say the least, on Twitter.
Oh God, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't so like inherently problematic. With like the way it's even a couple of people brought it up on Twitter, like outside of the conversation, and I'm just like, no, there's an approach that you can take, an approach that you can't take. If you take this approach and you don't know that you're gonna get like pushback, and then God, no, I have to explain the whole thing. It's just God, I'm gonna let chat try and tell me what's wrong with it as I just read through it and then go back and start analyzing what actually happened.
Which you think will be tomorrow?
Probably, yeah. Probably tomorrow.
Yeah, it's gonna be worth the wait, I guess, because I mean it's just, I mean I kind of read some of that stuff, and even I was like, holy cow, this is like, I think, and I hate to say it, but I have come to this conclusion that many atheist activists are just straight up dishonest at this point. Intellectually speaking, I think they do try to sea line. I do think they try to play dumb. I think they neglect any kind of evidence that just refutes them, and they will go after soft targets.
At least 2 bait and switches in that conversation. So if you remember yeah, if you guys saw the last stream about NonSequitur show stuff, which I do have a question for Boole, so please remind me, because he started to go into something that didn't really get discussed too much, but I don't want to bring it up until we're talking about the presumption of service and stuff. In that conversation, Hogtie pulled a bait and switch. So, for an example, he was giving some kind of example saying that, oh, well, then couldn't you then give service to his friend at his friend's house, and then their friend signs for it, and now some random person has the paperwork, and it's like, no, it's not a random person. You just bait and switched who the person was. It's either a random person or it's Kyle's friend. Kyle's friend is expected to know Kyle and is taking responsibility for that paperwork, or it's a random person who should not be signing notarized paperwork for somebody they don't know, as Boole so aptly mentioned in that call.
Yeah,
it was a bait and switch.
That was the other one you referred to, because the bait and switch I was referring to when somebody was saying, I don't know who you are, and I'm only here because of this person, even though I'm talking about this person, and it's like, wait a minute here, pick a lane, dude.
Yeah.
Pick a lane.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3. One of them was that he asked, well, I don't know who you are, but I'm going to throw my weight around as if you should know who I am, and then say that would you be willing to satisfy me? And the answer was no, because that's not how you approach that conversation, because Reds had already stated very clearly that he was not going to publicly share that information. So I'll analyze it. No, for sure. It would only, his reasoning is essentially, from my understanding, is that it would just perpetuate the problem.
Correct.
And that's not about perpetuating the problem. It's about just a quick, hey, yeah, don't do that. I saw some stuff that looked like it was going that direction. Don't do that thing.
Yeah, look, I know what he was referring to. I really do. And it had nothing to do with me whatsoever. And I don't know how my name even became attached to that. And I did, by the way.
Yes, you do. You know exactly how your name got attached to that.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, in any rational sense of that statement, okay? Rational, you know. But I did point that out.
See, there's your problem, Steve. You expect them to be rational.
Sorry, I can't help it, man. It's just one of those things, you know. I expect some kind of rational decision making, and I know it bites me in the ass every time. But I did point that out to Hogtie Champ, and he even agreed that it was unfounded. It was an unwarranted accusation with no merit whatsoever. But I mean, but here's the thing, though.
I don't trust what he's saying. I think he's two-faced, because he was perfectly amicable in the conversation, in the call, and then I ended the call, and we were talking after the call was over, and he was perfectly fine. He thanked us, we thanked him. It was a good time. He said he wanted to be around more. He had a question for me or something, and it was all perfectly fine. But then he's over on other people's videos completely shit-talking.
Yeah, no, and I saw that. And by the way, I would like to have some follow-up though.
And lying about lying about the scenario, straight up lying.
It's amazing how they change things. It's everybody that hangs out in that group. They literally change it, and I have the utmost respect for Hogtie. But yes, I saw him be a little bit duplicitous in that.
I don't.
Yeah, I can't front. It's a shame too. But he, like I said, did acknowledge that what Nate said was completely just. Yes.
I would be more impressed if he actually owned up and acknowledged his own lying.
We'll see what happens. But that kind of all this. So these couple things have led into these 2 things that we're going to go over today. Like I said, there's kind of a weird overlap of all of them. So I figured that we would, do a Goblin Reads, which, by the way, Cheshire does every so often on her channel that I love listening to. I like when she does the Goblin Reads. They're informative. She usually does them by herself, but you do occasionally get somebody to read them with you, which it's just as entertaining. But at least she kind of like goes through and explains what she's reading to people, because I think a lot of people read these things and they just do not seem to comprehend maybe what they're reading. And it's not so much like my audience; it's like the other side.
This past week, we did one with Jackson Wheat, which was really, really good. And I thought it was really entertaining because we got to dive into a little bit of some of the pseudoscience that you see in biology, not like evolution. We see that stuff all the time. That's not usually pseudoscience. It's usually denial. Now, what we got to see is people kind of twisting statistics, and it got political, which was really, really interesting, because the whole idea that these people were pushing is that extinction isn't a real thing, or doesn't exist, or isn't happening.
Wait,
and that capitalism is going to save the planet. And it was like, what? And they're basically saying that all these biologists are anti-capitalism, and it's like, no, it's okay. There are
something like that. I just don't. That is bizarre.
Go watch the video. It was really good. It's not anti-capitalist, by the way. If anybody's worried, it's not anti-capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if a species doesn't continue to procreate, they die out. It doesn't really take that much understanding of biology for that. I don't think, right?
Well, what do they think dinosaurs are? But it's the same. The article that we were looking at was saying that it appears to be the same kind of people who deny climate change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dinosaurs haven't died out. Birds, but the non-avian have died out. But yeah, I mean, we know species have got extinct. We've seen them go extinct in real time, like the dodo bird, passenger pigeon. Now, there's sometimes we thought
rhino, that blue macaw that recently just went extinct.
Yeah, and we expect many others to go extinct, within our lifetimes. It happens every day. Pretty much, a species probably goes extinct in some.
Smitty says science genre, is a Marxist hoax,
or genus, not genre, genus. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing, though. A lot of people will say, "Well, we thought something went extinct, but then we found one. Biology's wrong, evolution's wrong." It's like, no, that's not how it works. Coelacanth.
Oh, and before, I mean, it's already too late. Before conspiracy theories start spinning around about what Hogtie did or did not say, I've already shared the screenshots on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, the only reason I'm saying I'm going to send them to Thoughts by Jay Brown in DMs is because that's the fastest way for him to get the information. It's already been public.
She's already put all that out there.
Yeah.
All right, so how about we just dive into the my blog, www.greatdebatecommunity.com. If you haven't subscribed to it, you can, and you get notifications when it comes out. Now, I will tell people what you get initially and the final copy may not be the same. I proof as much as possible, but I do have like Katrine Feline and some other people that will proof afterwards, and I make very minor corrections. So if you really want to have the actual final, go to the actual www.greatdebatecommunity.com, where I write philosophy blogs and news about the NonSequitur case. All right, so we're going to dive into this one. This one I wrote some time ago, actually, hasn't it been? What was this, 2017?
2017.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Steve never changes his mind or corrects anything when he's wrong.
Yeah, I don't think I corrected anything on this one, but I've never had anybody show it to be inaccurate. I've ran it past lawyers and philosophers, and they're like, yeah, this is fine.
Yep. It's fine. All right. So whenever Bull is ready, Bull, are you ready?
And by the way, people will say, like, by the way, Steve monetizes this blog. I actually wanted to see if I could do it. I tell you what, I make about $2 a month off my blog. So
yay! Ashley Keeper 199 says, "Hey you," and a waving pair.
Hi Ash. Thank you, Ash. Ash has been very kind to my channel.
True facts. Okay. So this is Atheists and the Burden of Proof. For those who haven't seen my video from long ago on the burden of proof in 2017, scientific consensus and why the burden of proof for science is not the same as epistemic burden of justification or burden of proof. My video is based upon social epistemology by Steve Fuller. Mm-hmm. I'm always bad with names. Quote, a typical case would involve proponents of one theory needing only to assert O as evidence for O because the truth of O is so well entrenched that mere assertion commands assent. While advocates of the opposing theory need to go through a great many arguments and experiments in order to persuade the scientific community that not O is really the case, the mere assertion of not O may command little more than incredulous looks.
Yeah,
so
this
Ilya Moon for 199, or sorry, for 99 says, oh, with heart
Thank you,
eyes.
Moon. Mwah. So I made a video, and this was my early years, really early. So it was on screen cap kind of thing, and I was basically explaining scientific theories a little bit. And what Fuller was saying in this was essentially this: I don't have to give somebody an adverse amount of information to explain to them, like the theory of evolution, at all. If they say, "Well, why do you believe the theory of evolution?" I don't have to explain to them the theory. I don't have to give them massive amount of scientific evidence. That work has already been done in the scientific arena. So when we say that we have a confirmed model, a scientific model by consensus, though heavy lifting has been done in science, let me make that very clear. It is not the same in philosophy, but in science, that is how it's done. If you have a competing model that you think is better or the other one is wrong, you have the onus and the burden to demonstrate that and convince people by barter and persuasion that is the case, right? So if I say, hey, Cheshire, I believe the theory of evolution says why, and I don't know anything about biology. It is perfectly fine to rest your beliefs upon experts and say, well, 99.7% of all scientists in the world accept evolutionary theory, and from what I have learned about it, it corresponds to what I know about reality, and I think that I am more than justified to believe in it until somebody shows it to be wrong, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with relying on experts. It is appeal to authority. It's called argumentum ad verecundium, but it's not fallacious. And that's what I think a lot of people make a huge mistake. And by the way, I'm sorry, but I do think atheists make this mistake much more than I see theists making it.
If you cannot, the way science works is by building on the blocks that are already there. Otherwise, you would almost never have any scientific advancement. You don't need to prove gravity every time you do an experiment involving gravity. This is just not how it works.
You don't start back from square one.
Right. If I'm going to demonstrate that the Earth isn't flat, I don't need to go back to, pen drops. Now, a lot of people who are debunking flat Earth do, because that's the level of the people that they're talking to are at. They need that explained to them because they're not literate enough in science to be able to start getting into more complex physics. You've got a good number of them that say water always finds its level, meaning horizontal or whatever the hell they mean, but you put one singular water droplet and it does not, on a flat surface, it does not go flat. It bubbles, it curves. You put water in a cup, and surface tension is a thing. So water doesn't always do that, but you have to start explaining those things. But if you're doing the science and you're talking about physics, you don't need to prove water tension to do an experiment utilizing water. It's already built into the equations from that point on. Otherwise, we'd have to start from zero for every single fucking thing, and we would never get anywhere. Anti-maskers are an example. You don't need to explain how viruses work and very complex virology. You can, but you don't need to. You don't need to trust the experts and say, hey, covering this thing is transmitted this way. If you cover your face, you're less likely to get the thing. It's not, you don't have to prove that viruses exist at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway from that, all what I wrote and what she was saying, is that if you think science is wrong, just all you gotta do is show it. And by the way, you become very famous. But this is one thing that people also have to realize: one abnormality, one observation does not discount an entire theory. Falsificationism doesn't exactly work like that, right? So, I mean, when we noticed that Mercury had problems with its motion, what's that?
It's a little bit more. You need more.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. For example, like I said, when we noticed that Mercury could not be explained by Newtonian physics, we didn't say, "Hey, all of physics is wrong," right? We went, "No, we have an incomplete understanding." But Newtonian physics still works on these other situations. It doesn't work here. Let's find out why. And of course, relativity explains it just perfectly. But relativity has to also explain Newtonian physics. One does not falsify the other. And so when you have a scientific theory, now if we could actually show that all of physics is wrong, like, for example, like what we completely understand about gravity is fundamentally wrong, you would be the next Einstein. Just go ahead. I mean, fine. But what we're talking about here is the burden of proof is solely upon the person claiming that the scientific theory is wrong, or they've discovered an anomaly and they want to better the scientific theory. That's all on them. This is what we mean by scientific burden of proof here.
I do
and
think
it's that specific behavior that makes them doctors, Steve. Right? These people get doctorate. That's what you have to do to get a doctorate for the most part.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing on doctorates, and and again, this is anecdotal, and this is merely from my discussions with them, but they all seem to have the same position on it. When you're a PhD in a subject, it means you have a really amazing, firm understanding of not just the basics, but you mastery. But you've also mastered a very small, very, very myopic view of something, right? So, like, a PhD is very, very good and very, very, very specific.
Very directed.
Very directed. But that doesn't mean they don't have a mastery of the topic, right? So there is something ubiquitous to all PhDs, but one PhD on a very specific topic is going to have a much better expertise than another PhD, even though they have the same type of degree. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And they all seem to agree with that, from what I understand.
If you have a bachelor's and then a master's in marine biology, and then you have a PhD in orcas, and somebody else has a PhD in dolphins, whether it be behavioral or environmental, or so you could have somebody who has a PhD in marine biology, but specifically in like behavioral of pod life, or somebody who has the same PhD working in the same field with the same animal, studying the ecosystem rather than studying the animal's behavior. So you could have like 5 people with PhDs all on the same animal, all studying different things about that animal.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just the PhDs. Lawyers would have the same thing, right? I mean, lawyers offer basic, general education on law, but you ask a criminal lawyer things about tort law, or ask a business.
I'm glad they
it's
picked
going to be
up on
completely
it.
different thing. A divorce lawyer, as opposed to a prosecutor, they're going to have very different, really specific things about the law that they know.
I'm glad chat picked up on it. Orcas are dolphins. Correct. However, you could have a PhD in each different kind of dolphin.
Well, yeah, that would be your concentration. Yep. All right.
Yep.
Let's move on.
This should not be confused with an epistemic burden of proof, synonymous for this purposes of this argument with burden of justification. And this often what I see some atheists doing.
Early writing. I will go back.
This is the time before Intrigued Feline.
She's having a right now. Oh no, sorry, Feline.
Confusing evidential or empirical burden of proof with an epistemic burden of proof. An evidential burden of proof is a combination of the burden of production, bracket, what is the minimum evidence required to challenge a claim or dispute it, end bracket, and the burden of persuasion, which is, in brackets, the evidence to convince that the claim being made is true, end bracket. An epistemic burden, however, is merely...
Let me address that real quick. I think it's actually important enough to interrupt. This is exactly what's going on in a court case. This is why it overlaps with the what we're going to get into, is because in a court case, the burden of production is the complaint, right? You have sufficiency to even raise a complaint to the court system and then have it designated properly with the judge in the criminal or business court or whatever it is. The burden of persuasion is actually convincing the judge or the jury that, your case is correct, you have merit, the person is innocent, guilty, whatever. Those are different, but they both fall under burden of proofs, right? But those are more evidential burden of proofs in law, not the same thing as an epistemic burden of proof, which merely is a justification as to why you hold a particular belief. Sorry.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Well, you're not an idiot.
Oh, thanks.
62 IQ.
Did you see my pinned tweet?
I have.
It's basically Forrest Gump running. It's just a picture of him running, and it says, "This man had a 75 IQ, and he believed in himself, and he would believe in me too." So I will trust the smarter person with a higher IQ than I have. With 62, I can do it too. I believe in myself. Thanks, Forrest. Yay! My favorite is when we've made Bull laugh enough that he feels the need to unmute himself so he can express that he's laughing.
Because he's seen that tweet too. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
An epistemic burden, however, is merely a burden to yourself to justify holding a belief. The term burden of proof is a misnomer, as nothing is required to be proven, much like Big Bang wasn't actually a bag. Your apostrophe is
I know,
what?
I see it. I will go back and fix this, okay? This was in 2017. I've gotten better.
It's not wasn't, it's wansit.
Wanted.
How about this is a comparison of how far I've come in the last 3 years on my blog.
This is Steve looking into the future and seeing all the apostrophe words, like the slang.
Well, I won't even try to excuse it, but as I say, I've gotten better tools. Okay, go ahead.
Godless Scummer for 2 says, "Run, Cheshire, run." Thanks.
Life is like a box of Cheshires. Okay.
Oh. You never know what you're gonna get.
You're right, exactly.
The term burden of proof is a misnomer. Nothing is required to be proven, much like Big Bang wasn't actually a bang. But in most cases, epistemology, the burden of proof simply means burden of justification.
Yeah, they're synonymous. I can't find any distinction between the two in epistemology, nor can any epistemologist that I've talked to or philosopher.
That is something that I've noticed is a little bit of a problem in this kind of a conversation that at least on Twitter, that I've noticed. I don't know how much it happens outside of Twitter. Like, I don't know if you run into this conversation very much in your real life terribly often, but there is something to be said for, you've got a group of people demanding that it needs to be proof, or it has to be proof, or it has to be like that, and that's ridiculous, and that atheism means this, and it's babies are atheist. And in saying that, okay, if you use that, you're problematic, they start having an issue with that and saying, well, just for the sake of this, we're using this. But they refuse to do it the other way. Refuse! They absolutely. So if you say, well, burden of proof just means burden of justification, they go, well, then proof, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just, oh my God, why is it so unacceptable one way, but rules for thee, but not for me? To have a conversation, sometimes you need to meet somebody else on their level. You don't have to demand that they come to you every single time. And especially when you're going to be a dick about it.
Yeah, no, and I am fine if they were to have a consensus. Basically, they're going to use burden of justification in philosophy and epistemology, and burden of proof in evidential and law. I'm okay with that. I think it actually makes more sense. However, that's just not the way it is right now. And until it is, people need to understand when they're going to read a paper and they talk about the burden of proof. They're talking in epistemology. They're talking about just an epistemic burden, and until they realize that, right, they're not going to be able to understand these topics properly. And then what happens is you have people going on Twitter going, "You're just wrong. You're an idiot. Steve's wrong." By fiat, that kind of stuff. That's the whole point. Is that until it is, it is more mainstream how they use it, then there's going to be a problem.
Being dogmatic and demanding of other people to fit them into whatever worldview box that you want to is not helpful to the conversation or convincing to anybody. It just makes you look like an asshole. And when you project it onto somebody else, it just makes you look like more of an asshole. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, I get called an asshole all the time, and all I'm doing is explaining it. I'm not even saying that I advocate for it. I think it should be different.
Someone this morning said, you were saying, like, you're inept at this. You do not know what you're talking about. And somebody was saying, oh, Steve is just being arrogant and hurling insults and not accepting blah, blah, blah. And I was like, actually, incorrect. He is assessing someone's ability to have the conversation and understand the conversation that is going on, which is, of course, an opinion.
Yeah.
But it's an educated one.
Look, for example, like Steve Bauman, who's a geologist, says, "Hey, Steve, you're inept at geology." I'm going to be like, "Dude, yeah, I know." I'm going to be like, "I own that." Okay, I don't have any problem with that. There's many subjects I am completely inept on. You know what I do? I don't talk about those subjects very much. I mean,
well, you don't go around telling a geologist what rocks believe.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So, I mean, we all have to know our limitations there, right? I mean, I don't read anything about geology for the most part.
My favorite is
but
every single time these people get into an argument with you, they get so focused on like pedantic, I'm arguing with Steve, that I completely, well, what about this, and this? They just ignore it. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well,
why am I here?
I'll give you an example that happened today, matter of fact. And yes, Feline, I'm going to look into our dark mode. I think you're right. I'm going to change. I might be changing some of this up here. Plus, by the way, I have another domain that I've also on this particular domain that I'll be integrating as well. But I had this happen today on my Facebook page. If you guys haven't followed me on Facebook, go do it. I can get about 50 more. I try to like eliminate dead accounts. I'm pushing that 5,000. So go follow me, and I'll get rid of some other people that I think are dead accounts. But I had somebody come on today and say, "Hey, you were in this forum or group on Facebook, and they showed you that you were wrong by evidence and citation, and you're just a dishonest fraud and liar." And Shane came in, and friend Shane said, "Hey, wait a minute here. I was in that discussion. Nobody showed Steve any of this. What the hell are you even talking about?" And I said, "Dude, you're how dishonest are you?" I said, "That never happened." And at least I would acknowledge, well, people tried, but they failed. But this didn't even happen. I was like, your reaccounting of the events did not happen the way they did. And I got to admit, the guy said, I look back and you're right. Yeah, he was like, "You're right. You got booted, and then people had to post some stuff, but they didn't show you, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay, I accept your apology for that, but you still say that I am fundamentally wrong in an objective fact that I have said, a fact of the matter, right?" And so I'm not trying to give my opinion. I'm trying to explain a fact. And he couldn't understand what an objective fact was. And then he says, "Well, I'll just delete my post and have a good life." I'm like, what a coward! What a complete coward, man.
The thing is like, there's when you push somebody when they've said something like that, and then you push them to, okay, so now you agree that you never address it, they think you're being an asshole because you're like, "Oh, well, why are you I already said I'm sorry, why are you bothering?" It's because that's not what the conversation, I don't care if you apologize to me or not, I care if you talk about the argument.
Right, and not a half-assed apology. He apologized for saying that I was dishonest about what actually transpired, because I certainly wasn't. But he still said, "Well, what you said was an objective fact." Okay, show that it's not. All you gotta do is demonstrate it. I can demonstrate it as an objective fact. That's what objective is. I mean, that you, me, somebody else can go look at it. There's no subjectivity involved, right? I mean,
right.
I don't think he understood that concept.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought that was funny because it literally happened today.
No, because of course it is.
Yeah.
Could you find me a link? Helios, I'll just DM to you. It'll be faster. Okay.
I have my Facebook page in my video description.
I might actually. I don't know if I want to bother talking about it in a video, because I don't think there's I would have to play the video we were already in, and it's like, whatever. That's kind of weird. I don't like playing videos of myself and talking about them because it seems kind of silly. Most of the people who are in here saw that anyway, so they for the most part know what happened. I can just post it on Twitter and then post a link just with no you guys can go look. Adam Morgan for 199 says, "As a paleo student, I study beds of atheists deposit."
That sounds kind of nasty, actually.
Ew. Atheists are often said to not have a burden of justification or onus probandi if they just lack a belief, which, as we know by now, is not philosophical atheism. So Steve is acknowledging that there's more than one fucking meaning.
Wait, did you skip something, or am I off?
As I noted in my video.
Did you already read that part? Did I miss that?
Promoting the claim. Oh, did I miss that bit? Oh, sorry.
I don't know.
As
One of us did.
As I noted in my video, evidential burden for someone promoting a claim against the scientific consensus requires a much higher degree of evidence than merely just asserting that the consensus is wrong. However, an epistemic justification is required for any belief that a person holds, and that justification is not just to meet a burden of persuasion, but it is the burden one must meet to themselves to consider considered to be considered to be a justified belief.
I will edit this. Yeah, this is the before. We'll look at it edited after.
I'm enjoying that your own article is doing a better job roasting you than like the hours upon hours upon hours of video people make about you.
Look, I've even said I got better tools. And by the way, I had somebody who, like I said, I won't say who specifically, but a very, very respectful person. A very educated, respectful person I adore. They told me like, hey, your blogs have come a long way, and I'm like, oh, I appreciate that. I know, I'm not, I can't front that, man. But that to me is look, practice, man. You know, and
there is nothing wrong with improving over time. That's something you should be proud of.
And by the way, here's the thing though, I did call it 3 a.m. philosophy for a reason, because I used to write these things at 3 a.m. and I was dead ass tired, or just whatever came out, and I wasn't into proofing it that much. So. Not an excuse, but that is a fact. All right. But anyways,
Answers and Reason also posted something really interesting. I'm going to send it to Boole. Like, they just posted it, so perhaps we can bring it up afterward and just touch on it a little bit. Sure. I'll send it to Boole.
I really like that. So basically what I'm just saying here is that, this is more for a creationist that says, oh, well, I don't accept evolutionary theory consensus is wrong. Well, that's not a refutation, right? You need to have a very significant amount of body of evidence to demonstrate that something with overwhelming evidence is not the case. There has to be what's called a preponderance of evidence. So if somebody says that evolutionary theory is wrong, it's going to take a lot of work, like a significant amount of work, right? But that doesn't have anything to do with their own belief, right? It's like, why do you believe it's wrong? What are your conditions and reasoning for that, right? That is, by the way, that's not your burden to persuade anybody, to give them evidence for anything, to demonstrate anything to anybody else. It is, why do you believe this is wrong?
Right.
Okay.
There is very much a big difference between trying to persuade somebody else and proving something to yourself. And people can lie to themselves. People can pretend that they think one thing or they believe one thing and refuse to make any changes internally. That's why I think it's very important to value consistency. Anything that you say that other people need to show you for them to be able to convince you should apply to anything that you show yourself to convince yourself. The same scrutiny should apply either way. That's just why I think consistency should be maybe a little bit put higher on the priority list and value that people should have. But I believe, watch this. I believe that consistency is incredibly important and put it very high on my list of character qualities when I interact with people. For reasons. Those reasons have met their burden for me. This is what I've witnessed, this is what my experience is, and this is what I've decided, and this is what I believe based on that information. If I wanted to convince someone, I could get into a conversation about why it's important one way or another, whether or not what the characteristic is. So it could be this person lies all the time. Well, you know what? At least they're consistent. At least you know what to expect. And so there are reasons why and why not, and you might not agree with me, and that's totally fine. But that doesn't mean that I've proven that it is 100% the case that this is the way things should or have to be in society, right? It's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah, and by the way, that's called an autobiographical assessment or an autobiographical statement or self-assessment, basically. When you say, I believe this is the case, or this is the case, right? You don't even say I believe, because it's actually kind of redundant. If I say the sky is blue, I am relating to you that I'm holding the position that I believe the sky is blue. It's not a knowledge claim. It has absolutely nothing to do with knowledge. It is strictly dosastic, but both of them convey the same affirmation of the propositional content that the sky is blue. And
Right.
But when I do that, I don't. If somebody says, "Well, why do you think the sky is blue?" I have no onus to
Not
explain
your
it. I really
Laurel.
don't. Now I can, but if I say, "Look, that's just my belief," and I'm just telling you what my beliefs are, conversation's done at that point. I mean, okay, that's fine. You can do that. But when somebody insists, "Well, you made a claim, you need to prove it, you need to demonstrate it, you need to give me evidence," I tell them to piss off. And anybody should. That is not how you have a conversation of these things. Unless somebody's trying to have the burden of persuasion and they're trying to convince you, they don't owe you a damn thing when they're relating to you their personal beliefs. And this goes for an atheist, theist, or anybody else. And
So
this is, I think, a
anybody who
lot
is
of problems
interested
people have with that.
If anybody is interested in why this hogtie is being used as an example here, there is the what he was saying after the conversation, and linked below it is the conversation, so you can watch for yourselves and you can decide what you think.
Yeah, I made it very
tell
clear
me.
to him. I did right. I have been corresponding with him, and I did make it very clear that he kind of just brushed off what you said, and then I showed him numerous examples
He
of
was
what you
incredibly
were saying,
condescending.
evidence.
He was
That's what we
one, he
do.
was condescending. Two, he did not let me get through a sentence. And there was a lot of word salad. There's a lot of word salad. But that's my assessment. That's my belief and my assessment on what I watched. You guys might have others, and feel free to let me know, and maybe we can have a conversation about that another time. Because I think
I'd be interested.
I think it's good to analyze conversations you're a part of to see how you can improve, why, and how other people can learn to approach you, and what you think your boundaries are when you're having conversations. Because these kinds of things apply to your family, your work, to your spouse, to random people on the street. If you have a good understanding with what you're okay with putting up with, then it's far easier for you to draw those boundaries and be able to justify to other people and explain or clarify or explain to other people why you hold those boundaries, instead of just saying, well, it is what it is, right? That's exactly what we're talking about, the burden of proof and justification. Because if you say, hey, don't cross my boundary, and somebody says, I don't understand your boundary, you need to be able to explain it to them if you can. And if you can't, you don't have to explain it to them. But if you want to keep conversing with that person, yeah, you kind of do. Otherwise, there's just gonna be friction there that nobody's ever gonna be able to get past. So me saying what I'm saying isn't necessarily saying, oh, this person should never talk to me again. This is me being very, very clear about what boundaries and what lines and what I'm not okay with and what did and did not work in this particular conversation, and why. This is not just shit talking. This is not being childish. This is where you cross lines with me. Here's why you cross lines with me. Here's my explanation. And here's why I'm super duper not impressed. So unless those things get rectified, no, why would I? Right?
Okay. Yeah, nothing I can say otherwise on that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We actually agree. All right, let's push through this so we can get to the next thing.
Hell
we'll do
yeah.
paragraph by paragraph. Go ahead. So do the next paragraph. If you can, please.
Okay, that's atheist, right? Atheists are often said to have a burden of justification or onus No, we did this one. I read that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yes. Logically, as has been noted before, soft atheism, lack of belief, has the same logical predicate structure as agnosticism. Both are not BP and not B, not P. However, as it also has been noted before, both have different epistemic reasons for being held as a position. While soft atheism is not a direct doxastic position towards the proposition of P equals some God exists, as philosophical atheism is, which would maintain P is false, it is still a position, and to me still requires a burden of justification, just as agnosticism requires a burden of justification as to why we believe those labels apply to us.
Yeah, let me make it very clear too. Soft atheism is generally not BP, right? But I have actually shown that if you accept that, which again I think that's ubiquitous among like literally everybody except for one person I met on Twitter the other day. They're like, "Oh, well, it's not that." I'm like, "Well, okay, then what the hell you think it is?" I don't know what else you want to call it, but I've never ran across this before. I've had people argue they don't like the terminology, and I agree. I'm not a fan of strong weak atheism either. I don't use that terminology. But if you're going to use it, this is what it's generally held to be, right? Not BP. But I've also shown logically, using a formal proof, that if you hold to not BP, does not believe P, you also have to hold to does not believe the negation if you don't hold that the proposition is true. So it's like, I've literally shown this. And so when I say soft atheism, the reason I put down the agnostic predicate is because I've shown them to be identical in a formal proof that, to my knowledge, to this date has not been invalidated or shown to be wrong. That's why. But normally, I want to make it very clear, soft atheism, you'll just see as not BP, and that's fine. That's generally how I use it as well. But does that make sense? I mean,
it makes sense to me. That one person is very confusing. I don't. Yeah. The person you were dealing with yesterday and a little bit this morning on Twitter, I don't have any idea what their position is, what they think words mean. And I don't mean that as in you don't know what words mean. I mean, I don't know how they're using these words because it was so waffly. It was just, I don't know what they were saying.
I think they were trying to unfortunately think weak and strong meant like a gradient of belief, of convinced, how convinced you are. That's now, what I mean. Granted, there's some relationship there, right? I mean, if you're strong, obviously you believe rather than just not lack of belief. So there's some relationship there, but I think they're highly confused. But there's another proof that I have on my blog. You can go look at it later. But I show that strong atheism, weak atheism, agnosticism, and strong theism are all the same logical position for the most part, ostensibly. I mean, again, it gets complicated, and I don't want to get into the technicalities of it, but I've shown that logically they all have to be equivalent if you don't hold to certain positions. I mean, if that is the case, right? So there is a huge if on there, and this is one of those if-then kind of statements, like my WASP argument, my weak atheist special pleading argument, is quite literally an if-then-else statement. And yet people say, people on the other side, well, that's logically wrong. Okay, sure, show me. And yet they can't do it because anybody who knows programming knows if-then-else is a pretty well-established computer-type algorithm.
It never gets that far. This to me seems self-evident, as if one is going to say they are an atheist soft over agnostic, given they are logically the same syntactically?
Syntactically,
thank you.
Yeah, syntax is the same.
Yeah, logic. Then they have to have a reason to make that epistemic distinction, and that has to be justified.
Yes.
So I am arguing that even atheists who merely lack a belief still have some type of burden of justification. Even if just a trivial second order one, as I don't believe you, implies you believe that person has not made a... I'm trying to edit this as I'm reading. Implies you believe
that having a heart attack.
Person has not made a convincing enough argument for you to believe them. That in and of itself means they believe the person has not made a convincing argument and thus have a burden of justification to explain why they hold that belief. Bracket. Not a belief on the proposition, but a second order of justification as to why they believe the person did not make a convincing argument.
Yeah, and real simple on that. Yes, I will be going back and fix this. And by the way, yes, I'm happy to own my errors. I've said it.
What's the TLDR on that one, Steve?
The TLDR on that one is very simple. A second order belief is not a belief on the proposition itself. Right? So if the proposition is God exists, I'm somebody who abstains from having a position on it or suspends judgment. They're not saying the proposition is true or false, right? It's not on the proposition. They have a second order belief about your belief on the proposition, right? They hold, like an agnostic who does not form a position on the proposition, they have suspended judgment. They believe that they have insufficient reason to have a position either way, right? They're on the fence. By the way, hate to say it, but soft atheism, the whole lactheism, those are fence sitters. just as much as an agnostic, exactly the same. That is the same syntactic logical position. They are soft atheists who say, I merely lack a belief, are fence sitters. And so this is just saying that even by suspending judgment, that is a second order belief. It's a belief about a belief. That makes it not first order. Does that make sense?
Right, because they're not talking about what their personal position is. They're talking about what whatever has been presented to them.
Yeah. A simpler way would be this. Hey, Cheshire, if I asked you about, hey, does God exist? You say, I don't care. Okay, that's not a position on the proposition, right? It is a second order position.
Why don't you care? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It is a belief about the proposition. I believe that I don't care about this. It's not a belief that, I believe the proposition is true or false. That would be a first order. Awesome.
My fucks have left the building about the proposition.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I don't
could you pull up the screenshot
too in some ways.
Could you please pull up the picture I sent you? Thank you.
That's from Rutgers, Philo 101, actually. That's from Rutgers College course.
Yeah, this was just posted by Answers in Reason to sort of explain a little bit about what was going on in that Twitter thread. Rational belief 1. Belief, disbelief, and suspension of judgment. There are 3 cognitive or epistemic attitudes one can take towards a proposition. These are the following. 1. Belief. If you conclude that that a proposition is true, then the appropriate attitude towards that position is belief. 2. Disbelief. If you conclude that a proposition is false, then the appropriate attitude towards the proposition is disbelief. 3. Suspension of judgment. If you are unable to reach a conclusion concerning the truth value of P, then of the proposition, then the appropriate attitude towards the proposition is suspension of judgment. Note, belief and disbelief come in degrees. You may be certain that P is true, or you may be highly confident that P is true. These are both varieties of believing that P is true. So, brief example, the gumball analogy. In the gumball analogy, you're given a jar of gumballs, and you say, is the jar filled with an even number of gumballs or an odd number of gumballs? Or, if I say, there is an even number in there, do you believe me? I have no way of knowing as far as you know.
And by the way, Feline, these are your 3 most common epistemic statuses. There's not saying there's others, but this is basically atheism, theism, and agnosticism in a nutshell. But yes, there are other dispositions you can have.
Version.
Yeah, this is 101. Yeah, this is literally from Rutgers 101 that I've given out, and then Answers in Reason has used a lot of my stuff, and that's fine. It's not. I mean, I didn't come up with this, so the accreditation is to Rutgers.
How dare they?
No, he cites my blog all the time, and he actually gives me credit for it, and I appreciate that. But yeah, it's very critical to kind of point out that this is not just me kind of like randomly pulling stuff out of the air. I cite my sources, and I have reasons for why I hold my positions. So, all right, I think we're ready to move on to.
Yes, NonSequitur
before the hour too.
Hearing. Presumption of service. Are we ready?
I'm born ready.
Let's go. NonSequitur show hearing presumption of service. Well, I, Steve, have not yet received an official transcript of the hearing on Mr. Curtis's motion to set aside the partial default judgment. There were significant things that apparently the judge said I think are worth having some additional commentary upon. This is all based upon unofficial notes taken by people who listened to the hearing and up for revision once we get the official transcripts. I am also not an attorney, and I make no statement of fact here nor provide any legal advice of any kind. Everything contained herein is provisionally based upon what has been told to me and upon correction, reproof, and revision.
And up for, yeah.
Bill Kennedy for 5 says, "Are gumballs atheists?" Depends on who you ask.
According to Aaron Raw, okay, let's go with that. Yeah,
Gumballs are atheists. Gumballs know they were created, not evolved.
Well,
maybe.
Real quick, let me give you an example of that before we go too far into this one on the gumballs and God thing, which, by the way, has not been refuted. If a good example would be this, Cheshire, if I just had one gumball machine, right, and I asked you, do you believe they're even on? Clearly, you have no justification to go either way, right? You just know. I don't think there's any proper way to justify that.
You would suspend judgment.
Right. But let's say I had 1 million of these gumball machines, and I said, hey, randomly point to 100,000 of them, and you can look and see that they're even every time. And then pick another one. At that point, you would have, by induction, a justification to, so, you know what, I believe that the next one I pick is going to be all even, right? Because now you have priors, and you can use induction to make an epistemic justification on that belief. Does that make sense? But with one, you couldn't do that, right? You have nothing to draw upon. But if you have 1 million of them, and you've sampled 100,000, you just take random sampling. That's how statistics work, right? That's how induction works. At that point, you can say, yeah, I believe the next one's going to be even. And could it be odd? Absolutely. No black swan. That's not the point. The point is that, are you justified to believe that it is? Yes. Could you be wrong? Yes. Is there certainty? No. That's it.
Mr. Serious is getting really, really meta. Is the number 4 atheist?
Wow. Well, it depends if you're a Platonic realist or a nominalist, which, by the way, we'll get into one of these days. Because
the answer, Mr. Serious, is, does the triangle care?
Are triangles apathetic? We'll do that for another day, Mr. Serious. I'll get into nominalism and realism. Because I do tend to nominalism, but it's a convenience thing, which is, it's just a position that we these are linguistic things, that abstract concepts like the number 4, just we have this thing because we're creatures that use language. These are manifestations of linguistics of why we treat 4 as some kind of actual entity rather than something that has real ontology, right? So if you talk about the number 4 existing, then it's not saying that it actually has like a concreteness like this cup, but it's a matter of just convention through linguistic things because of language. That's it. That's how a nominalist would generally kind of explain something. And again, I don't think it's right or wrong. And Quine makes some very good arguments for Platonic realism. Not necessarily that is the case, but to argue epistemically why they should treat them as such. And can we know that something like the number 4 exists? Because he has argued, if I remember, that nominalists have a very difficult time saying, how do we know the number 4, even has any kind of existence at all in any kind of abstract case? Because in other words, it's through an epistemic thesis. Track. Damn it, Mr. Serious, see what you did? Took us way off track. Welcome to Caffeine Corner. All right, moving on. Oh, did we get a rowdy Puck?
Puck's having a time. Come here. Oh!
I can read. Okay, I'll read. My contention has always been that Mr. Curtis was properly served by General Statute 1A1, Rule 4J1C of the North Carolina Rules of Civil Procedure, abbreviated NCRCP, which raised the presumption of service as per Rule 4J2, and by a partial default judgment was obtained by Rule 55B, NCRCP by Mr. Curtis's failure to respond to the complaint within the time allotted by law. I have also maintained that the proper service was obtained by certified mail. A copy of the summons and complaint were delivered to the post office for service by certified mail and was filed with affidavit return receipt requested, and that the copy was in fact received as evidenced by the return receipt with the attached original copy of the return receipt as per North Carolina's, I really got a space in there, North Carolina General Statute 175.1084. Now, again, you can look at these things. I think I've annotated them correctly. I did have a couple people look this over. But basically what this is saying is that if you look at the rules of civil procedure for North Carolina, really what determines service is, one, was it sent certified mail and not registered mail? That rule was changed back in 2000. So it's not required to be registered mail. People start talking about registered mail, they're way off base already. Certified mail, return receipt requested, signed for by some place that was called a usual place of abode, by a person that's over 18 or of suitable age. And then the person got the papers. That's all they care about. That literally is proper service. It has no relevancy whatsoever where somebody lives. It has no relevancy if that person, didn't actually physically live at that residence. It's if they got mail there and they got it, that is enough to confer jurisdiction, which will, by the way, we'll get into because the judge was very clear on that. And he even asked Kyle's lawyer, do we have enough to confer jurisdiction? And she said, yes, I do. He says, do you believe that the court has jurisdiction over him now? And she says, I do. So these are my breakdown of what rules you would go look at to objectively look at what I just said to be the case, right? So when people start talking about, well, Kyle didn't live there, which, by the way, I absolutely convinced beyond all doubt is that he lied on that, and we will prove that in court. But it didn't matter. It wasn't even something relevant to the case, to the service.
Could we also point out real quickly that you just said, I am convinced of?
Yeah. I mean, I believe, right? I can, based upon the evidence that I've seen, it's just beyond overwhelming.
Yeah, it is a personal justified belief, and you may be able to convince other people based on the evidence that has been presented to the court. It seems to be convincing the judge so far.
Oh, yes. And
it's my belief that appears to be the case.
But here's the thing. If I want to convince somebody like you, I could take on that burden of persuasion and show you all the evidence, which you've already seen. But I mean, if some rando off there wanted to know I could do that too. But if somebody who's a dishonest, sea-lying idiot who has never got something right from day one, no, I'm not going to waste my time with them. They're going to see into the court record like anybody else. They don't get it. They get nothing. All right.
Right. And be mindful of the questions you're asking. If you don't get the answer that you're looking for, maybe keep that in mind, that perhaps you've asked the wrong question.
Yes, I agree.
Are we under North Carolina law?
Yes, ma'am.
Under North Carolina law, the presumption of service is given when the conditions of Rule 4 have been met, which is rebuttable by the defense, which means the defense has the burden of proof to show improper service, which in this case is essentially as per Rule 60b1 because of mistake, inadvertence, surprise, or excusable neglect.
Right. And there's other things under Rule 60, but I don't think anybody would ever argue that any of them actually apply in this case. That is the only one.
There are ways that you can rebut service, the presumption of service, and that is like you're in a coma, that you never actually got the papers, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, actually, that's even worse. Here's the thing, and then we'll get into this in what I point out is if you didn't get the papers, that's even more than just rebutting service. That is actually arguing that presumption of service never even arose to begin with. Right? That's a whole different defense. Yeah, it didn't even occur.
Exactly.
But excusable and neglect, I mean, they both are the same thing, right? You are basically rebutting the presumption of service. That is true. But it also raises the point that the presumption wasn't even given. That's why you rebutted it, because you say, hey, look, it didn't even come up. That's why I rebutted it. So if I was in a coma and never got papers, you rebutted service because the presumption of service never arose in the first place. Right?
Right. For over a year, Mr. Curtis was operating under the defense that the presumption of service had arose and that he believed that presumption was rebutted because he no longer lived at the address that he was served at. But that was until August 24th, 2020 affidavit where he changed his defense from merely having rebutted presumption of service, but that presumption never arose because he had stated in that affidavit explicitly, number 5, quote, I did not receive notice of this lawsuit from my mother. Rather, I received a YouTube link to a stream in which the plaintiff, Steve McCrae, was discussing the lawsuit. When I first obtained a copy of the complaint several months later, I filed a motion to set aside the default judgment and that had been entered against me. So you can see the problem here. Either he was served or he wasn't, and if you change your argument halfway through, it means that the other applies or does not apply. You can't have it both ways in this case. They're conflicting.
And it goes to a huge credibility issue, especially when for a year you never even brought up that he never brought up that defense before. It was never that I didn't get papers. It was I wasn't living, there, which we all said is completely irrelevant. But I think that when he realizes that is completely irrelevant argument, which I've said from day one, he needed to change his argument to, oh, well, I just didn't get papers a month later, which is a huge conflict to the audio recordings we have, which the judge noted. And the judge was not going to just let that go. I mean, in his own words, when you say, original papers that I got served, that's a problem when you didn't say, and by the way, that was only 3 weeks later, and then say, oh, wait, I didn't get the actual original papers until months later. There's something to be had about a credibility issue there. So that's one of the reasons why the judge had been so incredulous about a lot of things that Kyle has been saying, because there's some major inconsistencies in his affidavits.
Yeah, there's the.
I just want to point out. I was just going to point out that Kyle's just one walking inconsistency. It's not surprising his affidavits are out of order.
No, of course not. No, and again, one thing people have noted from me, I've been consistent from day one. I mean, what have I been inconsistent about? I mean, it's all on record. And this is what I see people doing. They're twisting what I'm saying to try to run some bizarre narrative, and they don't even read what he has in his own words have said or audio that conflict internally.
I think probably one of my favorites is that, I didn't know there could have been a lawsuit. Bitch, you told him to sue you.
Well, but here's the thing, right? And this is kind of a notice too, and I didn't put this in particular blog, but his lawyer was actually running a defense of actual notice not being sufficient to confer jurisdiction. And nobody's ever argued against that. People are like, oh, look, even the judge said actual notice doesn't confer jurisdiction. And we're like, yeah, who's ever argued otherwise? That has never been our defense, ever.
OPT lawyer says Kyle is a Green Day song.
Oh, there's a couple of songs coming out with him of him, I think. But I mean, that's just a complete red herring. We've never argued that actual knowledge confers jurisdiction. The argument is he got papers and was served for Rule 4. Okay.
There's no winning here. Everybody loses. My brain hurts.
By the way, somebody asked
yes.
Oh, real quick, somebody just asked, what do I benefit from all this? Vindication and justice.
What do you what do you benefit from? Is that a real question?
Well, it's from, I don't know if this is a fake account or not, but
what do we benefit?
Yeah.
We were like, Steve was fucking wronged. I was wronged.
Yeah. What was Steve gained by suing Kyle? Again, justice.
The fans were wronged by Kyle.
$30,000 plus, times treble damages, give or take.
It's not just justice for Steve. It's justice for Boole and everybody else who was involved in the channel in any way, shape, or form, including viewership. Anybody who ever participated in any aspect, liking the video, sharing the video, even just watching, engaging, all of those people were frauded by Kyle. So this isn't just about Steve. Now, Steve does benefit because he gets his channel back, he gets his shit back, he gets paid for the work he was doing, and he gets to see the person who fucked him fucking themselves over so badly that they go to fucking jail, and they deserve to go to jail because
it's past jail. We're talking prison. Yeah, it's gone past jail.
Prison.
But here's the thing. Again, I was accused of many falsities. I was accused of fraud, medical fraud, lying to the court, and a whole bunch of things. All of it was shown to be not true. Bull was accused of lying. Bull was asked to lie. Ben was accused of lying. Right? And so there is a vindication here.
These people supporting Kyle have gone around slandering Steve and Boole and Reds and me because they don't want to see these people win. So it isn't even just vindication against Kyle. This is going to be vindication against anybody who supported him, including KC and KJ running that Steve did some kind of bullshit medical fraud. Like the,
Don't forget Mr. Atheist, because I sure the hell haven't.
oh yeah, Mr. Atheist and GE
That's not
and
going to go
their
away for me.
blatant disregard for the people who not only supported the Non-Sequitur show, but a lot of those people supported them also, and they just spit in their faces. It's ugh,
Did you ever do a
ugh,
Goblin Read on my
gross.
open letter to Mr. Atheist? I don't think you did.
You just want me to read all your blogs.
I do. No, well, you read other stuff too, but I'm just giving you content. But I could read my old blogs if I have to, but it's not as cool as a Goblin Reads. You know, what am I going to do? Armchair layperson, dude, reading stuff. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, if people want to go again to my blog, go find my article, Open Letter to Mr. Atheist, because he lied his ass off. Absolutely lied his ass off. There's not even a question in my mind about it. He knew. He still continued to stream to my channel after cease and desist. I know for a fact he knew that we were 50-50. I know for a fact that he knew that Kyle did not have the authority to remove from the channel. We had discussed, matter of fact, Mr. Atheist was one of our first guests. He was in our conversations about this stuff. Reds knows this, Bull knows this, anybody around the channel knows this, and then he lies to his audience? Please.
All in an attempt to character assassinate you, and Bull.
Yes.
And Reds.
And
a better question might be, what did Mr. Atheist gain from behaving in this manner?
I have to ask him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, he sucked up to some atheist activists that have helped him, but yeah, I mean, he was duplicitous, and it was all column-y. It was basically a character assassination against me.
To be a consistent problem with people hanging around the ACA.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, I have no fondness towards atheist activists nowadays because I think they're just as duplicitous as evangelical theists. I see no difference. If they're both going to be in the camps where they deny reason, they deny facts, they deny logic, then what the hell is the difference? One is this a flip side of the coin of the other. So,
even potentially even worse than that, not calling out bad behavior amongst their own communities.
Agreed, and it's so funny. They're so willing to eat their own on some kind of like SJW type stuff. But when it comes to like actual things that we can actually demonstrate that they're wrong, nope, forget it. Never mind. Mr. Atheist lied to his fans. Never mind that he streamed to Steve's channel after Kyle, defrauded him.
I still have screenshots of all of the. This happened right when Twitter added the hide feature. And I have the screenshots that Mr. Atheist was hiding on his Twitter from people when he decided he wanted to talk about this. So yeah, Mr. Curtis, blah, 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 blah. There is the rub. There is one of the more notable major contentions that Judge Gale had with Mr. Curtis's testimony. Mr. Curtis had been recorded numerous times discussing just weeks in Discord about the original papers that I was served, ECF 35 9B, and, quote, "Of course I responded to the lawsuit. Not responding to it would be a dumb decision. So that's going to be taking place in a couple of weeks." There is I'm not going to speak to it anymore aside from that, but yet it will be happening. We are set to Rumble, ECF 35B 8B, which are the references if you need them. Mr. Curtis had also explicitly stated that he had missed a filing deadline because of his own negligence. Quote, "I missed a filing deadline because of something going on my side. Not Steve's. Not Steve's. So that was my fault. But it's going to be appealed." ECF 35 9A.
Let me clarify, and again, principle of charity here. He didn't mean appealed. He meant reconsideration or to vacate or to set aside the partial default judgment. He did not mean appeal because appellate court's a completely different thing. Now, I understood that. Hawkeye did understand that. Hawkeye was correct on that. But, I
don't think there was any contention there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very clear that he claims he missed the filing deadline.
Misspoken.
Yeah, exactly, and it happens. No big deal. But the takeaway is he missed the filing deadline. It had nothing to do with me. And then, by the way, there's no indication he ever did try to file anything initially. None whatsoever. That could be a lie. Probably is. Obviously, I think it is. But whether it is or not is unremarkable to the case. But he very clearly that this is when you miss a deadline, you don't get another try. You don't get two cracks at the case. You don't get a bite of this apple again. That would be extremely prejudicial to the other side.
Right. Yeah, that would be incredibly unfair. So, Mr. Curtis, in a single statement, claimed over a year later that he never actually received the service from his mom, seems in stark contrast to his prior recorded statements that he, in fact, had the original papers. The reason why this is of notable importance is if, in fact, Mr. Curtis had not received papers from his mom, who in North Carolina is presumed to be an agent upon signing for the certified mail with return receipt, as then the presumption of service would not be raised and service would have been deemed improper.
Yeah.
Also to note, the judge was very specific when he asked Kyle's lawyer if Kyle's mom signed any affidavit claiming that she did not give the papers to Kyle. Kyle's lawyer said no. She never signed anything that said that.
Yeah.
Burden of proof is on him to prove she didn't give him the papers.
Yeah, and the problem
that's where I think people get confused. We don't have to prove that his mom gave him the papers. We don't have to prove that. He has to prove she didn't. That's a very hard thing to prove.
I've seen that problem rise on Twitter. People are like, well, Steve has to prove that Kyle got the papers. No. That's what the presumption of service means. That we have the presumption. He has to rebut that. He has to show that he didn't get it. And one way to do that would be, hey, look, I have receipts that I was in Tahiti for the entire year. I could have not got the papers. And by the way, that doesn't always work. Somebody actually in Africa, they served got sent to their brother. The brother gave them the papers. They still got found proper service. So it is a large, huge, very, very high burden to try to presume service when you basically have been talking about getting served all this time and then say, well, no, I didn't get served. I mean, it's a very difficult
there's too much. There's too much here for anybody to put any justification on or burden onto Steve, because it's just not how it works. Because what you see, I think a lot is that, oh, well, you're just making assumption. Oh, that's just an assumption. It's like, it's not an assumption, it's a presumption. Two different things, especially in court.
Yep, exactly. And like I said, if you didn't get papers, then yes, there'd be a problem. But that's the judge is kind of looking at that, and he says, okay, there's a credibility issue. Which story is the correct one? I could tell you right now, based upon everything that's gone to the court, you guys could kind of figure out which story is the right one. But we don't want to get his mom involved if we don't have to. But it would look really odd to the court if his mom all of a sudden said, oh yeah, I didn't get papers. There would be some questionable issues there as well. But that's not going to happen. We really don't want to have to go after her because I think, like Ben said, she was probably manipulated. But Kyle has to actually show, not just by
the only reason.
He didn't get the papers.
I think we should be clear about this. The only reason that court or Steve's lawyer would ever be going to Kyle's mom for anything is because of actions that Kyle is taking. Kyle has been throwing his own mother under the bus for almost a year.
Yep.
This would not be on Steve like, oh, I'm just going to go after Kyle's mom. No, it would be Kyle is saying something that is forcing them to have to go to her.
And I didn't, like I said, I didn't want to involve that.
Right. Sorry. No, you're right. It's not. This isn't a matter of us choosing to go after anybody in particular. Nobody really wanted to go after Kyle that much if he just gave the show back in the first place. Steve offered him 50% in perpetuity to keep this out of court.
Well, there's a lot of things that he has to there's a lot of things he needed to do. But yes, we were willing to work with him initially. But of course, when you're a diehard narcissist, you just you're not willing to even make any concessions. You want to try to drag things out. You want to make it very difficult for the other person because you think that's some kind of narcissistic supply. And yes, a detractor is going to run with that. Steve's talking about narcissism again. Yeah, what's true? It is. I mean, this is just. I mean, perfect examples of what a narcissist does. And what Chess was saying, we definitely don't want to involve other people. I don't think there's a need to, but of course we will if we have to. But I didn't involve Ben. Ben came to us, and Ben has said I injected myself. That was his words. To be
fair, Kyle injected him.
Fair enough, but I mean, he didn't have to come forward. That was really on his own accord. And yes, I did not talk to Ben until September 6th. I'm willing to put that on affidavit if I need to and swear in front of a judge that is absolute fact. I would never testify to anything that's not true. I would never have an affidavit that's not true. And so, when these people are like,
why would you? Steve, you would have nothing to gain from falsifying anything. There would be no
I have
point.
my chat records with him. Knock
also,
out.
I just want to simplify this really quick here. Those backing Kyle because they can't or won't believe Steve, you're back. Whose credibility is being questioned in the court?
Yeah.
A court of law is questioning Kyle's credibility. Steve's credibility has not even been approached or brought up at all in the court system. Not once.
Not once. And the merits of the case have no relevancy at this point. The default judgment assumes that everything I've said in my affidavits is true and correct because Kyle failed to show otherwise. He didn't show up. So there's a tacit agreement there.
So even if this all has to go all the way back to discovery, which basically means, okay, now Kyle served, he gets a chance to present any evidence. Do you have anything, Kyle? You don't. So the entire year has been a galactic waste of time of the court, and they don't like that.
No, they do not. And we'll get into what the judge said on that. And again,
if anybody who is complaining about why we're not doing Non-Sequitur show or why we didn't just do our own thing, you need to go complain about that to Kyle. That's not something we can do.
If he thought we could do it better,
that's not our problem.
Not at all. Yeah.
He said both things. He said, I would never hand it over to Steve. Fuck that guy. And also, well, if the court told me to, I would, but he hasn't. The default judgment as of right now is still standing. He's still ignoring it, and he's still making money off that channel.
Yeah, and I want to make it very clear. What we're going over today has already been public record. What's coming down the pike? Full nuclear. I can just say that. Full nuclear. It's more than my expectations even. So I'm very happy with all this. Give it another couple weeks, and people will obviously find out more. But what we're going over now is basically just a recap. I've already told my lawyer that we're going to be talking about things we've already discussed. He's fine with that. So as long as I don't get into what's coming down the pipe, because we're not going to, why give away our game plan? That's silly, right? I mean, but yeah, we'll be happy to go over and explain to people things that have already been coming out, and he doesn't have a problem with that.
And to be clear to anybody who's watching that, Steve, in context, is not saying we would keep things from his lawyer in a court of law. Because you have to share evidence. I don't want that to be misconstrued because you know how these people are, right?
Yeah. When that's the expectation, when that is the expectation, both me and Steve and Boole, all three of us in this call over separate things has been said, before this gets thrown out and pulled out of context, if that's how we're having to even deal with having a conversation, that's a tell. That's a flag as to how fucking assholey these people are. They'll take anything. It's pathetic.
It's demonstrated too many times to even count. All right, let's continue. Yeah.
Mr. Curtis, in a single statement, claimed over a year ago that he never actually received the service from his mom, in stark contrast to his prior recorded statements in that he, in fact, had the original papers. The reason why this is of notable importance is if, in fact, Mr. Curtis had not received papers from his mom, who in North Carolina is presumed to be an agent upon signing for the certified mail with return receipt, as then the presumption of service would not be raised and service would have been deemed improper. As both the judge and Mr. Curtis's lawyer have, I believe, correctly noted, having actual knowledge is not in of itself sufficient to confer jurisdiction. But that is not what we have ever argued. We have never argued in the case that Mr. Curtis had proper service due to actual knowledge, but was in fact properly served by Rule 4 as he had received from his mom the original papers. This is unofficial, as again, I have not yet received an official transcript, but I believe the question that the judge asked Mr. Curtis's attorney was, unofficial quote, Judge Gale, would you agree that even if he was living in Charlotte, if the papers were served upon his mother and she then promptly delivered those to Mr. Curtis so that he received the papers with the presumption that Rule 4 allows, would that have been adequate service to convey personal jurisdiction? Mr. Curtis's lawyer, I think that if Mr. Curtis had not rebutted the presumption of service that his mother is his agent, and I think that he also, under the law, would have had to, in fact, receive the papers from hers, a phone call, for example, wouldn't suffice. Judge, but I ask you the question, is if the mother received them, signed the return receipt, and then delivered the papers to Mr. Curtis, and he received them, would that have been adequate to convey personal jurisdiction? Mr. Curtis's lawyer, I believe so, yes.
And that pretty much has been the same thing that I've heard from other people's notes. So again, may not be like absolutely perfect because it isn't official, but the people that listen and were taking adequate notes, they all say the same thing. Very minor, maybe like, is that kind of thing differences, but her basically the judge was asking, if this was the case, if you got papers, is that sufficient to confer jurisdiction? Yes, which I've been saying all along. He even made it very clear, even if he wasn't living in Charlotte, would it not be proper service? Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, Boole and Cheshire and audience, is this something that I've said how many times? I mean, I don't know how many times I've explained it to people, and you have these people on the other side that have no involvement in the case, that know nothing about the law, it seems, telling people, oh, that's not true. When you ask them for evidence, like, which case are you citing? You get bump kiss. I know Treat Feline did a whole, 8, 10 tweets on this or more. She did a deep dive, and she put all the cases and said, none of these cases have any relevancy. What cases do you guys have? They produced nothing. Nothing, because it has nothing to do with where he lived, which is what I've been saying.
That's all that's been produced this entire time. The most accurate thing that this has consistently been is Kyle not showing the fuck up.
Yeah, and this whole concocting of the story that he didn't get the papers and because he didn't live there. Yeah, him not living there was no relevancy. I think that he dug his own hole, jumped into it, and started pouring dirt over himself. Because it wouldn't have mattered whether he lived there or not. And whoever gave him that, I'm not saying somebody did, but if somebody did give him that brilliant idea to try to run that narrative, I thank you, because you really don't know how bad you screwed him. Thank you.
Golden Unicorn for 5. But Steve, Kyle deserves to know your game plan. He needs to help. Need to help him set up a defense. He deserves that after all the lies he has spread about you. Laughing emojis.
Exactly.
Listen, here's the thing. Even if we told Kyle what was coming down the line, I get the feeling that he'd probably just shit his pants anyway. I think there's no.
Yeah. No, I mean, he unfortunately he will know in probably 3 weeks or less. It's just how the court system works, and that's not a problem. But until then, let him stew. All right, continue on.
Yay! Okay. This is to me. This is to me what the crux of how to determine if service is proper is efficiently and what?
What proper service was proper is efficiently and succinctly trimmed down to.
That's how you spell succinctly?
Isn't it?
That is Steve's way of, this is the brass tacks of how to determine if service is proper.
Well, I know what the word succinctly is. I just didn't
Right,
realize
but
this
it's
is how
not.
it
But
was
this particular. Well, that's succinctly, yes, but the sentence isn't very succinct.
Yeah, I'll edit it a little bit. I could have worded that a little bit better. That is one. I did edit that, and I think I edited it.
succinctly.
I screwed it when I went back and edited something, and I think I kind of messed up a little bit. So I'll make it read a little more fluently. There's 2 errors I've already I want to fix in here too, and grammatical stuff. That's all. Nothing factual. But
I don't know if
go
I've
ahead.
ever actually seen this word written out. Anyway, service was proper is efficiently and succinctly trimmed down to. Did Mr. Curtis's mom sign for the certified mail, return receipt, and then deliver those papers to Mr. Curtis, as that would in fact convey personal jurisdiction? Contrary to what some who are following the case have erroneously claimed, when Mr. Curtis's primary where Mr. Curtis primarily lived is of no relevance whatsoever to if personal jurisdiction was conferred. In North Carolina, you can have more than one usual place of abode. And Miss Curtis, by signing by the certified mail, legally raised the presumption that she is an agent by law of Mr. Curtis, Rule 4, J22. By which merely denying she is an agent fails to rebut, and delivering those papers to Mr. Curtis, then personal jurisdiction was conferred and service was proper. Mr. Curtis's lawyer has been arguing to the court in the records that actual knowledge, such as a phone call, for example, wouldn't suffice to confer personal jurisdiction, but I believe that she would be correct if in fact that were such the case. But our argument to the court has been that Mr. Curtis did in fact receive original papers from his mother soon after the case was issued on August 30th, 2019. Not that he had actual knowledge. And we are arguing proper service based upon that. But arguing that he was served properly as per Rule 4, and the judge seems to agree that if Mr. Curtis did in fact receive papers, then service was proper. Where he actually lived is of no relevance. It is pretty clear that the judge does not believe Mr. Curtis rebutted service, and he that was willing to rule on during the hearing on that, if not for the inconsistencies in Mr. Curtis's affidavits. This is what Glenn has been arguing, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. Yeah. No, and Glenn's absolutely right. The judge had said, hey, look, do you believe that we have conferred jurisdiction over Mr. Curtis? And she says, I do. Twice, I believe. And as Glenn had pointed out, the judge would have ruled, because he even said that they failed to rebut service. He would have ruled on that. But then comes in the August 24th, 2019 affidavit, 2020 affidavit, where he says, wait, no, I didn't get papers. And he's like, whoa, hey, wait a minute here. There's a huge inconsistency here. There's a credibility issue to be had, and for what's called closure or completeness of the record, he has to resolve that because somebody is lying to the court. I'll give you a guess who. And so I'm perfectly fine with that, because he had actually
said
in
the chat if you think it's Kyle.
Failed to rebut service.
I want the court of public opinion. Hey, court of public opinion, who do you think is lying in this case? One in the chat if you think it's Kyle.
And anything else?
There is no two.
My question is why did you act completely like you had received papers if you didn't receive papers? That's my big question. He even responded to the default judgment. Why would he respond to the default judgment if he didn't have papers about the court case?
And here's the
why would he do anything in regards to the court case if he never heard about it?
Well, again, but hearing about it doesn't matter, right? If you heard about it, again, that's actual knowledge and not specific.
Right, but you wouldn't but that's my hypothetical exactly. If you hear about the case and you start acting like, oh God, I got to do all this stuff regarding the case, and you weren't served, that's on you. That's on you, though. right? It has nothing to that's your personal decision as defendant in the case to take actions on the case, regardless of whether you have notice of it or not. One could argue you served yourself at that point if you start responding to the court.
Here's the worst part of it all, though. Had he not had that affidavit, it's already been done, and there probably wouldn't have been criminal charges.
Oh yeah, if he had just gone along with the court system,
I shouldn't say that.
time,
There would have been a lesser chance of criminal charges. I think it's almost an inevitability. But he basically really screwed himself by that affidavit. I mean, that's when the judge said, "Hey, look, you've been ignoring my judgment. You've been basically flaunting it. You have been gamesmanship." He warned. This is an official way he can actually look into it, show there has been some criminal aspects to the case, and then put them to the DA. That's.
He's warned him a couple of times, right? Because there was that statement that people are saying that, oh, Steve needs to behave correctly. So there was that whole one reminding during this COVID shutdown.
Yeah, the judge really chastised me a lot, didn't he? Oh wait, no.
Yeah. Didn't even talk to you at all.
No, because there's no relevance.
It is really comfortable. Thank you to the person who sent me this onesie. It's great. It's my new favorite. I'm basically going to live in this thing. I might go to the grocery store later. Judge, unofficial quote. I would have to tell you right now, but for the August 24th affidavit, I would say that you've totally failed.
Yeah, it's a little bit mixed after that, and I'm not kind of sure what he said. I think it's something you have totally failed, something to rebut service, and so I didn't
hear the word rebut. I heard you have failed blah, 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 proper service.
Proper service. Yeah, I think that's actually what it was more the case.
That's what I heard, but there was like
total failed, something garbled, proper service. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's on board with that, but the context is definitely there. If you don't think that the judge has actually said, "Look, yeah, you really have failed miserably here," then I don't know what to tell you. He's not going to overturn the judgment. Kyle is more than aware at this point that that's not going to happen. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$2.99 from Ash. Shout out to Chesh, Diamond, laughing emoji, #1 fan next to Smitty, kissy face. Thank you. Yeah. I do get paid for these shows based on the amount of super chats, so
she does.
Believe it or not.
Wait. I'm sorry. Wait. You actually somebody actually pays you? Because I thought this whole thing was 100% yours anyways. Don't you pay yourself?
Pro bono.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
for anybody
actually paying a co-host. I'm sorry. That's just an odd thing to think, right?
Steve is such a nice guy that if you make out a super chat directly to me, like Helios did last time, he actually sends me the full amount. Unfortunately, YouTube is still a piece of shit and takes 30%, but you know, that's how it works.
I make sure people are taken care of. All right, go ahead.
So the judge wants to have completeness of record to avoid any potential of appeal. He did say that, if I'm remembering correctly. He said, right now, if I were to rule, there would be a good chance of an appeal, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, because there's a fraud upon the court, and he could Kyle could come back and say, well, I said that I didn't get papers, and the judge ignored that. Yeah, and he was absolutely right. And the judge did exactly what everybody I've talked to that knows law said, that he did exactly what he should have done.
Yeah. This is what it is proper procedure. Any potential of an appeal, and because he cannot just look past the glaringly diametrical statements of Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis talking about the original papers he was served a mere 3 weeks after the date of service, to which Mr. Curtis would have to try to rebut presumption of service, to then, over a year later, changing his defense to the presumption of service never even arose because he didn't get the papers served until several months later. Bunny Wabbit for 5 says, well, if it's for Chesh.
Oh, she's going to make me convert pounds. Now you're just making it difficult on me, aren't you? But thank you.
Judge, unofficial, quote, I've got to determine whether I believe his testimony that he did not receive the papers was credible or not. Jackalope for 5 says, paying a co-host, so that's how a 50-50 partnership works, question mark.
It's weird. I don't understand how people don't think that people should get paid for doing something when we have an agreement. Hey, this is what our agreement was, and Cheshire and I have correspondence of exactly what our arrangement is. We both think it's very fair. So it's like, why would anybody think otherwise? Why would somebody say, hey, look, hey, Cheshire, we have this agreement. I'll give you your money at the end of the year, and then I take it all. It's like, do you know what would happen to me? I would be literally, probably, people would be outside my house with pitchforks at that point, and they should be.
Ash for $2.99 says battle for support heart. Thank you, guys. You're so sweet.
She says, yes, you have to do the math. Actually, I have a computer that does it for me, but thank you, Bunny Rabbit.
You still have to do the work of inputting it all.
Yeah, well,
this is in order to minimize any chance of appeal by Mr. Curtis, as well to investigate any possible charges of perjury to Mr. Curtis. The judge seems to want a limited discovery as to why Mr. Curtis has conflicting statements as well as contradictory affidavits from Mr. Curtis's former boyfriend, Mr. Potts, who has sworn the court, I think he meant to the court, that Mr. Curtis never lived with him as Mr. Curtis had claimed. But that part of the story is for a future blog entry. Once again, however, the judge cannot just simply overlook possible fraud being perpetrated upon the court and wants both Mr. Curtis and Mr. Potts disposed under oath as to why there are such conflicting stories in their affidavits and with internal inconsistencies and possible altering of evidence in Mr. Curtis's own submissions to the court. You notice that the only part of this who submitted shit that isn't on this list? Steve.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the funniest part. Like I said, nothing I've had put to the court is contested. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the judge, by the way,
the books. There are books that we both have access to.
But it's so funny that what I've given to the court was accepted on face value because Kyle didn't contest it. But for anybody who thinks they don't have evidence of that, they've got to be out of their minds. I mean, do they really think that myself, Reds, Bull, Cheshire, Glenn, and other people that have been around that have not seen the actual evidence of everything I've said that is completely true? Do you really think they would be this supportive if they had not seen the evidence that would have been normally gone to discovery? Of course they have. I mean, it's just absurd to even think otherwise.
Godless Scummer for 5 said, so your co-host gets paid for this instead of $10 paid to G-Man?
Well, she wanted that originally all to be donated to G-Man. I said, but probably not a good idea, so. G-Man Relief Fund.
Ash Key said, I'm just happy to send a super chat and not get yelled at to stay on topic. I don't know where that happened to you, but that's really funny.
Yeah, wait, that didn't happen here.
Aww.
That sounds mean. Who did that happen?
I mean, I could see something if something like really serious is going on, but usually it would be a matter of, we'll read the super chat later, sort of thing. Anyway,
I mean, there was a limit, obviously, but yeah.
The judge seemingly has also issued a pretty stern warning to Mr. Curtis that the longer he chooses to ignore the partial default judgment, the worse it's going to get, which to me is a pretty significant indication that he has no intention of vacating or setting aside the judgment. What it essentially comes down to is the credibility of Mr. Curtis when he states that he did not receive paper until several months later, as opposed to his own statement on recordings that he did. To that, I merely just say, in the original papers that I was served.
Yeah, and it's funny because somebody came to my page and said, there's been a couple people, and one person did come to my page and they said, oh, look, Steve's lying to people. He's trying to change it from the papers he has served to, quote, the original papers that are served. See how he manipulates his audience.
So funny.
And by the way, Cheshire made it very clear to me, Steve, you've got to point out the fact that in his audio recording, he said original. She's been harping me out for that. And I said, you're right. And so I did add that in only because that's what he said, right? It wasn't like some manipulation. Cheshire could testify that she's been bugging me. You how many times did you point that out, Chesh? Original. right?
The original papers that I was served. Original papers. That's like not something down the line. The original papers. And I'm going to link it in the chat for anybody who thinks there has been any change whatsoever, as there has not been. I have the goddamn stupid video that Red's Rhetoric made, and then he only posted it on Twitter, so I went and re-got it and posted it on YouTube.
You do? Okay. Yeah, give me. I want that link too, because I should have linked this. I should have done that to this guy, because I uploaded a different just a copy of the audio recording to my Google Drive, and I said, look, if you want to listen to it, here it is. I don't want a bunch of my Google Drive, and I want copies, so I said I was going to delete it in 24 hours. And he's like, well, I can't listen to that because it has a virus. I'm like, an audio recording on my Google Drive has a virus. He's like, well, do you want me to show you the screenshot? I'm like, I don't care if you have a screenshot of whatever, false positive or whatever. This is it. Listen to it. Don't listen to it. I don't care. But don't sit there and go, oh, well, this audio recording has a virus, which I wouldn't even know how that would work, when I'm trying to show you that everybody who's listened to this knows that he said the original papers ever served. That's just...
How would you know it had a virus on it if you didn't scan it? There you go.
Because it has a pre-scan, I guess.
Yeah, so, well, it might have been the file was too big to be
That's
scanned.
what I was just going to say.
That's what I told him, too.
And it is, and it's true, because the Discord is, it's like, what, 3 hours long, 2 hours long, something like that?
No, I know that's what it said. I guarantee
it's a long audio recording, so they can't...
That blue error message.
Right, it says, we can't scan it because it's too big. Right. Well, yeah, duh. But it's still not MP3 opening up as audio in your... audio player. Yeah, there's no virus possibility there because it's raw data. It's not executable code.
You're not downloading it, Helios for 10 said, I dedicate the super chat and all of its funds to Red's Rhetoric purely to make him go, what the fuck, when Steve sends this money to him. I would like to see his confused face, but I would also like to keep my site. Steve, you're muted again.
Am I muted?
There you go. Hello.
I didn't mute myself. What did Helios said? I was reading something.
Helios gave $10 for you to send to Reds, just to confuse him.
Oh no! I'll send to her. Reds don't get shit, man. Reds gets his own super chats.
Haven't you heard about how much money? Haven't you heard about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Red's Rhetoric makes off of his channel?
You know, it's so funny. I gotta tell you, when people are like, oh, they do this for the money, do they not realize that I make enough to survive, and that's basically it, and that's fine. I never expected to make any kind of huge amounts.
I don't yet.
And here's the funniest thing. And by the way, we will get to Cheshire to that point. It will happen. But here's the funniest thing is that
it's a slow grow.
One of the reasons people have not been able to like get rid of me off the internet is because at least I make enough to survive, and as long as I do that, you know, where am I going to go? So I appreciate every Patreon that I have. I appreciate every super chat. I appreciate the members. And this is, please subscribe to this channel and join this channel and join Cheshire channel and become a Patreon of us both. And have Bulinator do his producing, pay him to produce your channels and stuff like that. It's everybody's, you know, lifted up. But here's the thing, like I said, I don't expect to make a lot of money, right? And so them trying to you know, get me off the internet by trying to character assassinate me, my core group knows that's all bullshit. So it's doing nothing but making themselves look like idiots. It really does absolutely nothing to affect me, because my core group looks at what they have to say, they look what I have to say, and they objectively evaluate it, which I've asked them to do.
There's somebody in the chat asking about the recording, the timing on the recording. The original papers that I was served was on October 6th, 2019. Which would be a month after service, right? Give or take. However, the other recordings that were submitted to the court were from before that. The original papers that I was served was recorded after the other quotes and audio that's been submitted to the court.
And by the way, that's a good way to probably end this when we're ready to end it. Can you get that to Bull so he can just play the audio? He doesn't have to play the video, just the audio itself portion, and then we can kind of fade out after that.
Yeah, sure. I'll send it to him. Here you go, Bull. Steve likes to throw things at you while we're live.
make him earn his keep, man. I gotta make it as difficult as possible on him. No.
Rude.
Let's see here. All right, so I'm kind of looking for any kind of comments that we missed or anything like that. Any questions before we kind of wrap this up?
Oh, BT Toast says that Team Skeptic says that if you take pleases out and demand subs and patrons, it will work better. He experimented with it last night and it works. All right, everybody needs to go to my channel right now and go subscribe. There's a link to one of the videos on my channel. Go give that a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because if you don't, I'll come over there myself. And if you do, maybe I'll come over there myself. Fight me IRL.
Right,
this is now my boxing outfit. I'm gonna get a sandbag. I demand patrons. Also, still, thank you to the person who sent me this. I'll make sure this one gets taken off the list, and they requested I added something to the list, so I will add that. Sub to Cheshire, or you hate Canada, or sub to Cheshire if you hate Canada.
Yeah, there you
Why
go.
not?
Yeah, it's more the second one, but whatever. All right. So, anyways, yeah, I don't think there's too many questions on this. I do appreciate you guys objectively looking at this. I will edit the grammatical stuff, and I'm fine with that. But as far as the factual stuff, I don't see any issues with anything in there. And again, this is just going over which has already been out there. Nothing new. There will be new stuff coming out in the next 3 weeks or so, give or take. And then, yeah, it's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal.
Go sub if you guys want to make sure that you catch the video sort of breaking down the I think I'm gonna clickbait the hell of the title and say Goblin Reads debate Red's rhetoric versus Matt Dillahunty. 100% not clickbait. It wasn't really much of a debate. It was kind of just a slap down.
What day do you think
I'll go through that and explain it. What?
What day? What day?
I don't know, either tomorrow or Wednesday. Either tomorrow or
All right,
Wednesday.
Like I said, you got questions on this stuff, don't hesitate. Message me, message Cheshire. We'll try to answer the best we can.
Yeah, we're pretty open about it.
Comments. Yeah.
We don't obfuscate or, run you around and send you on wild goose chases about the shit we've said.
Yeah, by the way, Feline, yes, the recording is linked in the ESF. However, it is not shared. That requires actual permission. So please don't use that because then Peter has to give permissions for that. So yeah, don't use that link unless you actually have to. But it's not a shared link, by the way. So, anyways, all right. This was fun.
That's it. Take us out, Bull.
Bull, play the audio.
Bye.
Oh, I had to. What I did was, in the original papers that I was served.
What was that?
Papers that I was served.
Oh.
Papers that I was served. Papers that I was served. Papers that I was served. Papers that I was served.
In the original papers that I was served. Bye, everybody.
Steve was right.